All right, the advent of code is starting very soon this year, so I just wanted to put out a quick video on a new programming language that you might want to try to do the advent of code in this year, just to learn something new. That programming language is called the Onyx programming language. It's a language I've been developing for the past 3.5 years. It's become a real programming language with all of the features that you could really want as a developer. So I wanted to show you how to get started and get a little Hello World program set up and running in your environment so then you can maybe take on the advent of code in it. So I'm just going to be looking at this in VS Code because it's probably one of the easiest ways to do this, but you could set this up in a variety of different editors, and they're all explained on the docs of Onyx. The first major step in installing Onyx is, well, actually installing the executable so you can actually run it. You can go on the website and you can copy this SSH and curl command, or you can just type it out yourself. This is going to run a script that's from the Onyx website, and it will, well, it'll set you up for actually installing Onyx. So if I look at this, I get prompted to choose a WebAssembly runtime. If you are on Linux or Mac OS, I guess if you're on Linux, you have a choice, basically. You can choose to use the WASMer runtime, or you can choose the OVM runtime. As it kind of describes here, the OVM runtime is a little bit nicer because it does support debugging. So from within VS Code, you can launch a debugging session and step through your code and look at all your variables, which is rather nice to use, but it is quite a bit slower than WASMer because OVM is the Onyx virtual machine, and it was something made for Onyx, and I was the only one who's worked on it, and so it's not incredibly great. It's not incredibly fast, but it does work for most purposes. Your other choice, if you're on any other system, is to use WASMer, which is a industry standard runtime. It is very fast because it compiles, I think, using LLVM. If not, it uses the CraneLift compiler, and they're both very, very fast. So I'm going to choose the WASMer runtime to install. And once I choose this, it'll download it. Hopefully my internet's a little bit faster than what it seems like it is. Perfect. It's a pretty small download. It'll download it, it'll install it. And obviously I already had it installed, so my profile hasn't been changed. But on your first installation, it'll prompt you to basically restart your shell because it added some environment variables to your bash RC or your ZSH RC, whatever one you're using. So with that set up, and if we pretend that I've restarted my shell, I can run the Onyx command, which gives me access to the Onyx toolchain. So from in here, I can run programs, I can look at all the different help options for how I can run programs, and so on. So we're gonna get started with an actual project. So what I'm gonna do is make a directory here. I'm gonna call it AOC 2023 for the advent of code of 2023. And then in this directory, I'm actually going to open VS Code to use this directory. So if we open that directory, oh, good old VS Code. There we go. If I open this directory in VS Code and I say, yes, I do want to trust the authors of this. Right, we have a blank project. Let's get it set up to use Onyx. The first thing you're going to want to do is run the Onyx package init command. Well, we're not really making a package that's going to be reused by other people. We do need a package to store any dependencies we bring in and or our LSP configuration. And so I'm just going to call this, I'll call it AOC 2023, and for the description, I'll call it Advent of Code 2023. There's no URL associated with this at all. The author, if you want to put your name there, you can. It doesn't really matter. All this does is make this Onyx package .cutl file. So cutl is a document language that I'm using to describe this, and as you can see, what I typed in there just populates this little package field, and that's all we really need to care about for now. So let's get started making actual code. So the way I like to set up my advent of code is I like to have and actually I want to rename this. So what I like to have is a solutions folder and an inputs folder. So So in solutions is where I'm going to write all of my code for every day, and then in the inputs folder is where I'm going to put the inputs for every day. So let's make a day 0 .onyx for, well, the 0th day, and this is what we're going to use just to test our installation. So the most basic Onyx program you can really write is the Hello World program, and it takes a couple parts. So the first thing you want to do, actually, I just had a brainwave. The very first thing you want to do is actually install the Onyx toolchain. So if you're in VS Code, you can do this right from within your browser, or your extensions window. You can just install this very simply, and I don't think it requires restarting your system. It should automatically register itself. I am going to actually, because I actually already had an Onyx thing installed, I'm going to uninstall my previous one and I'll reload my workspace. And there we go. Now we're sitting better. Okay, so now I have the little Onyx logo next to my Onyx file. It knows that this is an Onyx file, and I'll have all the syntax highlighting and LSP support that I need. So we're going to just write our Hello World program. So the first thing you're going to do is use everything from the core package. So use is used to bring in symbols from a different package. The core package is where all of the standard libraries live. And then this curly brace star curly brace simply means everything from within there. If we wanted to list out specific things, we definitely could. For our case, we could list out printf, but in any advent of code, I just include everything because I'm probably going to need most things from the standard library. So the next thing we need to do is write our main function. Functions in Onyx look like this. They look a little bit weird, but when you understand the rest of the language, it's actually really simple. So this part right here is the function. I'm actually going to make this a little bit bigger. This part right here is the actual function. It takes no arguments, it doesn't return anything, and it has an empty body right now, which we're going to fix that. This function is then bound. That's what this double colon operator is called, the binding operator. It is bound to the symbol main. And so what main is really just kind of a compile time reference to this function. So unlike other languages where you have a different syntax for how you declare like what you might call a lambda or an anonymous function versus how you would declare a function like this, in Onyx they're actually the exact same. And it's just this one's given a name and bound to a particular symbol, whereas in other languages you maybe wouldn't do that. So with that explained, we can actually just write something that looks very similar to Hello World from any other language. I'm actually going to make it say Hello Onyx, just for the fun of it. So from within here, I'm just going to clear my screen, and we can actually run our program. To do that, we just use the Onyx run command, and then we give it our program we want to run, which in our case is solutions day 0. I can run this, and what do you know? We have Hello Onyx. So we know this is all working. Now, what we don't have set up yet in this project is actually the language server. So if I misspell this, oh, actually, I misspoke. VS Code actually doesn't need any configuration. So if you're using VS Code, you don't need any extra configuration for this particular thing. Every Onyx file already has support for the language server. But for just clarity, we can also manually configure our language server, which involves a couple of steps. So the first thing you will want to do is actually go on to the GitHub for Onyx Lang, and one of the projects will be the Onyx LSP. In here, you can follow the installation instructions. It's honestly pretty simple. Once you clone it into a folder, you just go and run the shell script called install.sh. This shell script is really simple. All it does is compile the project, and then it copies it into the tools folder in your Onyx path, which is a way for you to extend the functionality of your Onyx toolchain. So, for example, when I run Onyx, it only shows me these particular subcommands, but there actually is another subcommand called LSP that I have set up and installed. And the way that works is it's just in this Onyx path tools. Anything that's .wasm in here becomes a subcommand that you can run, which is incredibly easy. So once you've set up the LSP and just ran that command, assuming everything works, if not, you can do it manually and build it yourself and then copy it to that folder. You now have the LSP ready, and so we can initialize the LSP in this project by running onyx lsp init. What this does is it adds a section to the onyx package.kdl file, which just gets added below that configuration section. And so here we have a couple things we need to kind of populate. So the LSP can operate on two different modes. You could have a project mode where you want to always compile in a particular way, because no matter which file you're currently in, your whole project always gets compiled like from one particular root file, which is probably how most things want to do it, right? You have like web server projects or whatnot like that. But the admin code is actually a little bit different. Really, you just want to care about every individual day is like its own thing that you want to care about. So I'm actually going to switch this mode from project to file. That tells the LSP that we're actually going to go on a per file basis. Whatever file you have open, that's the file it's going to try to compile and see for and check for errors. So when we're in file mode, we actually don't even need the source files directive. If you were in project mode, you could list out like what your main file is or what files you need to include to compile. But in file mode, we actually don't even need that. And actually for the admin of code, you really don't even need these other two. Working directory does default to the current working directory if you don't specify it. And we're not going to really include any extra directories unless you do need to in your admin code, which is perfectly fine. I'll leave these here, but I'm just going to leave them as they are. I'm then going to restart the window, because that will launch the LSP, and so I can make sure that it's all working. So if I look at the logs for the LSP, I mean, I could parse through this. It doesn't really matter. It should be all set up and working. If I go and misspell this, I'll get the error just like I would expect. Again, if you're in VS Code, you don't actually really need to do this because it just assumes by default this is the configuration in VS Code. You just have no configuration. But for posterity, you can put it in there and everything should be good. And so now everything should be good to go. You should be able to have your solutions to run. You have a folder for your inputs. Maybe just to briefly describe how I would use that, you would put all of your input in like a text file. This is some example input. And then what I normally do is I just use the function os.getContents, which is a really simple function. You just give it a path. So in this case, inputs day0.txt, and that returns the contents of that file. And you might actually even call this input, because that is really the input to your problem. I'm just going to print the input, but I'm going to do it in a way where I kind of format it so I can really see that it is what I'm printing. So I can do a formatted string just by putting curly braces there, put some quotes around it so I can really see that that is working. And then if I come back here and go back up my commands and I rerun my solution, you'll see I get my input and it says this is some example input. And so one thing to note is that I always run my solutions from the root folder, and so I have to do inputs, then day 0. If you're running your solutions from within the solutions folder, you would have to do like ... inputs, obviously. So just a little thing to note there. But this is how I normally set up my project. And I just load the contents and then carry about parsing it and making it work. So this is definitely one way you can work in Onyx, and it should work on most systems. But there is another way. If you don't want to install anything for Onyx, you can actually use the Onyx Playground, which is a place for you to write Onyx code in the browser. So if I run, so by default, let me actually open this in an incognito browser so we really get the default experience. By default, you're kind of in this dark mode theme with one file called program.onyx, which you can run right out of the gate. So when you run a program, the output gets put over here in the little output window, and we're not going to really worry about the canvas window because none of our solutions are really going to use the canvas. So what I like to do first is I like to put it in Vim key bindings because that's just who I am. And personally, I like the blue theme with Nord Dark. I think this looks pretty nice. But you can customize that to however you want. What I would do next then is make a new project for yourself. For example, Advent of Code 2023. So this gives you a blank sort of file structure, and then we can set this up exactly like we set up the VS Code one. If I minimize this, right? I can have a new folder called inputs. I could have a new folder called solutions. I could have, I don't want to rename it. I want a new file called day0.onyx. And I can have a new file called day0.txt. Nice and simple. So in day0, I'm just going to put the same thing. This is an example file. And then in the Onyx file, I'm just going to write that exact same code. Right? I include everything. I write my main function. I'm going to print, I'll use printf this time, printing out hello world, or I guess I said hello Onyx. And then I got the input using os get contents of inputs day0.txt. And then I just printed that out using input : that. Excellent. So now, if I run this, we'll actually see, oh, so this is actually a good thing that I ran into. So we're getting an error saying that it couldn't find the main of our program. The reason is I have to tell this what my main is, right? Because you could have multiple files in here. You need to tell it what file to run, like how we do here. When we tell it we're going to run the day0, you have to tell it what file you're going to currently run. And so you can just right click on day0 and say set as compilation target. So now this is the file that is going to be run when you click the play button. And so when I do this, as you can see, it ran. Now, we did get a little bit of an issue here. Nothing printed out for that. I think that's because I currently don't support the ... in the OS layer, the virtual file system that I have. So just don't put the ... And you really don't need that if you're working in the in here either, right? We don't need the ... It's kind of implied. We always are operating out of the current directory. But yes, this supports a full virtual file system. You can read and write from files that are in this sort of file structure. And so the solution should look the exact same so long as you set up your project the exact same. And yeah, this is another great way to do Onyx. And then if you want to share it with other people, you can click the download button, and then they can come click the upload button, re-upload the file, and you have your whole project shared across like that. It's really easy. So either you want to do it natively on your own system by installing some stuff, or if you just want to try it online without any commitment, both are great options. Yeah, I hope you have some fun trying Onyx for the Advent of Code, and yeah.